23-24. So we knew that that had happened. I knew about that. I knew that there was a swollen shoot, but I didn't know about the extent of the spread of the virus. And then we also knew that there were issues with climate change. Ghana used to have 8 months of rain, 4 months dry. The previous year it became 4 months rain, 8 months a dry period. We also knew that Cocoa Board has some financial challenges, although the previous management kept denying. I recall when President Mahama, then candidate Mahama, publicly said that Cocoa Board was broke. The management then issued a long statement, virtually telling him that he doesn't know what he's talking about and he does not understand the industry and all that. So we have suspicions that because we're hearing all manner of things, but we didn't know the depth of the financial situation. So, like I said, we knew that there were challenges, there were issues, but these are things that we could also fix with the right attitude and right team in place.
Now, you speak about the financial problem and also the yields and so on. What about the Ghanaian involvement in the industry? Because we are hearing that the local LBCs have collapsed.
So I think that one of the notable things I found at Cocoa Board was that Cocoa Board perhaps is the only regulator that does not really take local content seriously, because it's an open field across the value chain. So whether it is at the buying end, it's at the processing end, it's at the sourcing, everywhere you find heavy foreign participation, and foreign participation that has virtually dwarfed indigenous businesses. Especially the troubling one is in the area of sourcing, where you have the LBCs operating. It used to be a place that was reserved for indigenous companies, but now the major players in that particular space are the foreign companies. And because of Cocoa Board's financial issues, we have also not done syndication. 24-25 we didn't do syndication. 25-26 we will not do syndication. Now, this has also impacted the indigenous LBCs heavily, because previously, and we had done the syndication for about 32 years, the last one being 23-24. Now, what happens is that anytime Cocoa Board goes for the syndicated loan, out of the syndicated loan, Cocoa Board creates what they call a seed fund. And the seed fund is what is given to the LBCs to go and purchase the beans on behalf of Cocoa Board. Now, in the absence of the syndicated loan, there's no seed fund. Now, for most of the foreign LBCs, they have then the ownership, the owners outside fund the purchase of the bean. So the indigenous LBCs are then left stranded. So it's only a few of them who are able to get some of the foreign buyers to ask them to buy on their behalf, who are able to get some money advance to them. And so, although the business then had been virtually taken over by foreigners, there were quite some 8 or 9 indigenous LBCs that were doing well. But this new financing arrangement where there's no longer a seed fund has also impacted them seriously. And because it was not something that was planned, and it was just sprung on us because of our financial situation, the banks also perhaps were not prepared to have designed a financing package for these LBCs in view of this particular financial arrangement. So one of the things I've been doing since I assumed office has been to engage the banks to look at how we can deal with these issues to save the indigenous LBCs, because if you're not careful, maybe by the 3rd year of going with this financing model, we would have no indigenous LBC in existence. So I've been engaging the banks, I've engaged the governor of the central bank, because we have a couple of ideas that we believe that if the central bank buys into it and they approve of it, we'll be able to use that to get the indigenous LBCs to stand on their feet and be able to participate.
Are there any left in the system?
There are.
A few.
There are some who, despite the situation we have, there are some who are still doing quite well. But the question is for how long? you know, because now with also the cost of the bean, it means that you need a lot more money to be able to operate in that area. Because if 2 years ago, what you needed to do, let's say 1,000 tons, today you need 3 times that to do the same 1,000 tons. So it's become more expensive.
Yeah.
If Cocoa Board were to go for a syndicated loan today, we'll be talking about something in the region of 3.5 billion or 4 billion. In the past, we used to talk about $1 billion, 1.2 billion. Yes. But today, on the basis of where the price of the bean is, if we were to go for a syndicated loan, we'll be talking in excess of 3 billion. Yes.
Now, there's been so much talk about the drop in production. Of course, you're speaking about swollen shoot and other factors and so on. Well, one of the major factors is reported to be galamsey.
Yes.
Is that true?
It is. It is. Galamsey, to an extent, and mining in general, is impacting cocoa production heavily. First of all, the swollen shoot appears to be the major thing because it has ravaged 40% of our farmlands.
Wow.
40%. And swollen shoot has no vaccine.
You have to cut down the
Yes, it was first discovered in 1936. That's what led to us establishing Craig in 38. And so you can't do anything. You just have to cut off the trees and then replant. So you do the rehabilitation of the farms and all that. And it's quite an expensive venture. We had an opportunity, maybe we'll talk about that later. We had an opportunity to have done about 156,000 hectares, and we took all the monies and close to $300 million, and we only did 40,000. But we can get into those details later on. So if you look at the issue of mining and galamsey, the law which protects cocoa as a tree, as an economic tree, is an AFRC Decree 47, 1979 decree. And it's outlived its usefulness because the sanction regime really is not deterrent enough for anybody to go and cut down a cocoa tree. So per legislation, rubber is even more protected than cocoa. So anybody gets up. So, and curiously, when I went around, one of the significant things I found out was that everywhere there's cocoa, there's a mineral. Everywhere you find cocoa, there's a high possibility of finding gold or bauxite or diamond or something there. So you find people who are on their farms, and then there are those who come here and say they have prospecting license. And so they're cutting down, they're taking over the place, they're cutting down the trees because we do not have enough laws to protect the cocoa tree like rubber is protected. And then you have landlords who then come in and say that, well, I've sold my land to some people to come and develop. So when we go to BBNE, one story we were told by the farmers was that they had about 3,000 hectares. They were a cooperative. And that the 3,000 hectares were going to be destroyed for a bauxite refinery. Around the Nyinaini area. And so they were asking us to intervene. And so people had just virtually, those who said they were landowners, whether chiefs or family heads, had decided that somebody wants to set up a refinery. They needed that land, 3,000 hectares. And so they were going to give this to them. Now, 3,000 hectares will give us a minimum of 3,000 tons of cocoa. A minimum of 3,000 tons of cocoa. And this 3,000 hectares will be destroyed if we do not do anything about it. So this is the extent to which mining and galamsey is actually affecting cocoa. And for that reason, one of the things that we're doing, when I came in, there had been an attempt, I think with IMF, to amend the Cocoa Board Act. But it has stalled. They had appointed a consultant, but then it has stalled. So one of the things I did was to task the new director legal to ensure that within 2 months they can work with a consultant for us to deal with these amendments, send it to the AG and the Finance Ministry, which is now the supervising ministry for Cocoa Board, to look at all the things so that we can take it to Parliament for the unnecessary amendments to be made. And so in that amendment, we are now looking at how we can protect the cocoa tree and the cocoa farms. And then a lot of things that are outdated and outmoded that we need to change. And even try and legislate the producer price that we pay farmers, the percentage. So we just don't leave it to anybody and how they want to play around it and all that. Thankfully, the draft is ready on my table. We're going to look at the draft. Let's all the key stakeholders look at it. And then we believe that maybe by end of June or July, we'll be able to get a final document which will be ready for Parliament.
Well, we're going to take a short break here. And when we come back, I'd like to ask Dr. Randy Abbey how they propose to deal with the problem of the swollen shoot disease. I mean, it devastated cocoa in the 1960s. How do you just propose to deal with this problem? Short break.
Middle, you're not Biana. I'm going to be able to do everything. I just say, baby, shit. Mangashi.
Junior! I'm saying so enough for maybe the no.
Sister Cospa, it's a niggas.
I'm using the why. Why?
Down Yankanawa.
Sister Cos. Use gas. Gas ye fast, ye easy, ye convenient. And wow.
Let me see your hand.
Welcome back to Talk Time, and we are in conversation with Dr. Randy Abbey, the Chief Executive of Cocoa Board. Now, Doc.
Yes.
Swollen shoot.
Yes.
How do you propose to deal with it?
Okay. So, like I said, there's no vaccine for it. You need to cut down the trees and do the rehabilitation. And it's ravaged about 40% of our farms. Now, Cocoa Board embarked on something which I believe was laudable. And if we had succeeded, would have been the real game changer. Would have been. And that had to do with an AFDB facility that Cocoa Board took to rehabilitate 156,000 hectares of both diseased and moribund farms. So you have two categories of farms that we need to bring into production. One are the diseased ones, those affected by the CSSVD. And then you have the moribund farms or the aged farms. Now cocoa can fruit and make you money for about 30 years, between 25 and 30 years. Now from 25 years to 30 years, you need to think of how you can cut them down because they become weak and replace them.
Yeah.
So there are those you want to call aged or moribund, and then you have the disease farms. Now, under this facility, which was presented to Parliament for approval, Cocoa Board said they were going to do 156,000 hectares of these farms, both moribund and then disease farms. Now, this 156,000, if done, was going to bring add to our production a minimum of 156,000 tons, a minimum. So a minimum that you get from a hectare is 1 ton, but you can do 2 tons, in some cases even 3 tons. Okay. So this was going to add a minimum of 156,000 tons to Ghana's production. So Parliament approved the facility. Under that other facility, it was about 600 million. There were other portions that were supposed to be for processing and others. Those were not assessed. But for the rehabilitation, the moribund farms plus the aged farms was $223 million to do 156,000 hectares. Then there was a component for irrigation, $40 million US. Okay. Now, after the approval and everything, Cocoa Board now goes back to the bank to renegotiate for the 40 million meant for irrigation to be added to the 223 million for the rehabilitation. So the rehabilitation now moved from 223 million to 263 million for 156,000 hectares. So the irrigation part was cancelled and the money added to the rehabilitation. Now, I assumed office, KWESI, only to find out that Cocoa Board had spent this $263 million, the loan money, the AFDB. We are still paying, we pay with cocoa beans. The $263 million gone. And another 700 million cedis taken from Cocoa Board's coffers for the same rehabilitation. Yet, the farms completed and handed over to farmers that has come into production is 40,000 hectares.
How come?
So, originally, 223 million for 156,000 hectares. Then we added the irrigation, they added the irrigation 40 million to it to make 263 for the same 156,000 hectares. Then they've gone into Cocoa Board's coffers, taking another 700 million, added to the 700 million cedis, added to the $263 million. And what we have to show is 40,000 hectares completed and handed over to the farmers.
How come? Is it that the initial estimates were not properly done? What has happened?
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
Have you found out?
Well,
are you finding out?
Yes. I mean, there are a series of audits going on. The agencies, as I speak to you, the Auditor General is conducting a special audit from January 2017 to January 2025. So they are there conducting a special audit. The OSP is written to us. They are also conducting an audit that's in the area of procurement. The IOCO is also in there conducting investigations. They've asked for some documents. We have submitted those documents to them. We also have a story similar to the ECG's missing containers, over 200 containers. The National Investigations Bureau is also working on that. They asked for the release of some staff to aid in the investigations. We have complied. So those things are ongoing. I would want them to focus on those things whilst I focus on how I can turn things around, because they have the expertise to do those things and find out the issues. But what worries me is the fact that having identified a problem with our production levels and having decided to go and source for this huge amount of money to at least bring 156,000 hectares into our production, we go take this money, we add the money for irrigation, we take another 700 million cedis from Cocoa Board's coffers, and what we have to show is 40,000 hectares completed. They attempted another about 22,000, which they did like a phase one. They didn't finish. So when you go out, the farmers say, they are kanguremuno. And so I recently, about 3 weeks ago, asked my deputies to then engage these contractors, because we've spent money already on those things. So we should engage them and find out how much more it will cost to finish this about 22,000 and then bring that also into production. So we are yet to even know how much that will also cost us. So that obviously will increase that 700 million part of the Cocoa Board money. But how $223 million for 156,000 hectares has become $263 million plus 700 million cedis for 40,000 hectares and partially 22,000 hectares is $1 million question that we must answer. Because you see, KWESI, we need to seriously deal with this CSSVD thing. The estimates show that we will need about $1.2 to $1.5 billion to be able to deal with all of this. Now you can imagine if we had added 156,000 tons to our production, that would have made it easier for us to completely pay off this loan, and of course be in a better position to even take another facility to maybe do some 500 million more, so that we can then bring in a lot more into production, maybe another 250,000 hectares or so. So we're now doing a pilot with the World Bank in 3 districts, 2 in the Western region, 1 in the Eastern region with the World Bank. It is that project that I am determined for that to succeed and for it to be done very well. I was doing a costing analysis of the World Bank one we are doing now and the AFDB one. Because it will shock you to know that under the World Bank one, we are doing a hectare for $2,900. Under the dollars. Under the AFDB one, it was $4,600.
How is that possible?
I don't know.
Cocoa Board,
yes.
Does it prepare annual accounts, annual audited accounts?
Yes, by law.
Does it?
Well, yes, it does. It does. It does. It is the 2024 has not been done.
But 2023 has been done.
2023, I believe, I need to check. But it will interest you to know, I found out that for 6 quarters, Cocoa Board was not presenting financials to SIGA. We're supposed to every quarter present the operational report and the financial report. Mm-hmm. Cocoa Board was presenting the operational and not the financial, without the financial. And it happened for 6 quarters, so for a year and a half. And so I'm not surprised that a lot of people had suspicions about Cocoa Board's finances, but they didn't have a lot of details. There was a lot that was being kept away from everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
The audits are going on, the investigations are going on, and so on. How do you operate now? You're not getting your syndicated loans. Mm-hmm. The local banks are wary of Cocoa Board and so on. How are you going to stay in production? How are you going to fulfill your mandate?
So
this huge financial.
Let me tell you another one that I discovered about 3 weeks ago. So I think about 3 weeks ago, I was outside. I think about 4 weeks ago, and then my deputy finance calls me and says that, Chief, sorry, I have to depress you this morning. I said, what is it? So I've just made a discovery. I said, what's that discovery? I said, well, it will shock you to know that in December of 2024, the previous management issued an irrevocable letter of credit for $48 million for the procurement of 80,000 bales of jute sacks. In December 2024, irrevocable letters of credit on our Ghana International Bank account. $48 million. Now, what is fascinating about...
But the interesting thing is that by December 7th, 8th, 9th, we knew the government was changing.
So that is even, when I give you the picture, you'd appreciate it. So what makes this even more, more puzzling, is that if you check the records, as at the end of the 21-22 season, Cocoa Board's record says that it had 94,000 plus bales of jute sacks in its stores. Yet the Cocoa Board management decided to procure 75,000 bales for 22-23 when we had over 94,000. Now, a bale is 300 bags. Every bale contains 300 bags. And so your projected production will tell you the number of bags needed. And because they are brought by sea, there's always a 2% allowance for sea wetness and all that, which is being covered by insurance. Okay. So we had 94,000 bales. And Cocoa Board went ahead and procured another 75,000, which is in excess of $40 million. That year, 22-23, we used only about 51,000 bags or so, a little over 50,000 bags, which meant that the 94,000 in stock was more than enough for that. But we actually procured another 75,000 bags. Okay. And
in December?
No, in 22-23.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
At the close of 21-22, we had 94,000, but procured 75,000 more. And we used for 22-23 just 50, a little over 50,000. Okay. So, and when we brought in the 75,000, we cleared minus about 1,000. We didn't clear about 1,000 bales at the port. So we had now over 100,000 in stock. Yet, the following year, 23-24, Cocoa Board went to procure another 75,000. And that 75,000, Cocoa Board cleared only 17,000 of it and was left with over 50,000 at the port. That year, we used a little over 30,000 sacks. Meanwhile, we had over 100,000 bales in stock. So we cleared only 17,000 and left over 50-something thousand. And we used only 30,000. Then 23-24, Cocoa Board went to procure another 56,000 again.
So the one which was not cleared at the port,
yes,
it was still at the port.
On paper, yes.
On paper,
it was still there.
Yes. Okay.
So Cocoa Board procured another 56,000. All of these procurements are in excess of $40 million. 56,000. Now this 56,000, Cocoa Board cleared less than 1,000. Less than 1,000 from the port. And that year we used 20-something thousand. Because our production levels were dropping. So you needed less sacks. Okay. So now you are in a situation where you have on paper over 110,000 bales that you have not cleared over a 3-year period. But you were still procuring. So we had 110,000 that we had not cleared at the port. And then we had 70-something thousand in the stores. Then 23, 24, 25. That's for 24, 25. Then in December of 2024, Cocoa Board decided to procure for 25, 26. We had not cleared the 110,000. Then we signed a contract to procure 80,000 bales. When you had 110,000 you had not cleared, you had 75,000 in your stores. They signed a contract to procure 80,000 and issued in December 2024 an irrevocable letter of credit for $48 million for these 80,000 bills.
So what are you going to do about this?
First of all, I can't terminate the contract. I can't do anything. It's gone. The bill of ladings have started arriving. So it is also something that the National Investigations Bureau is investigating, because it's part of those containers together with agrochemicals that was when I assumed office. They said over 200 containers were at the port that have not been cleared. So they are investigating whether indeed we can find the containers there or not, because you find people arrested with brand new sacks. You find people arrested with agrochemicals. Ghana Cocoa Board, not for sale. All over.
So, Randy, why did you accept this job?
Somebody must do it. Because somebody has to do it. Yes, I accept that the first 6 weeks I asked myself a lot of questions. You know, but there again, whatever be the case, there will be Ghanaians who have to do it. And if the mantle is on my lap today, I need to seize the opportunity, take advantage of that, and together with the team, try and save this industry. Because you see, we have 800,000. Our database shows that we have 800,000 farmers. If you take maybe an average family of 5, you're talking about 4 million. 4 million. Cocoa Board alone has do you know what the staff strength of Cocoa Board is?
No.
Okay. So on the payroll, there are about 10,260 people.
Wow.
Yes.
One of the biggest employers in the country.
10,260. That's what is on the.
So with this mess, how are you going to find money to pay staff, to run the operations and so on? This is my question.
So it's difficult, but it's also doable. So together with the team, we came up with a plan. You know, so we have a plan, and the plan is that over a 4-year period, we'll be able to retire the debt. That over the 4-year period, we'll be able to improve gradually what goes to the farmer until we attain the 70%, which is what the NDC promised in the manifesto. That gradually we'll be able to work towards getting to that point. But as we speak, Cocoa Board owes close to 33 billion. Cocoa Board signed road contracts to the tune of about 22 billion. So the Ministry of Road that has highways and feeder roads and urban roads and everything is done contracts of about 76 billion. And then Cocoa Board, which is supposed to deal with cocoa, has signed contracts of 21 billion. Now, even on the cocoa roads, if you recall, during the IMF, the DDEP, IMF thing, Cocoa Board signed up to rationalize its road contracts and reduce its exposure from 21 billion to 6.6 billion, if you recall. I got to office only to find out that nothing had been done about it for 2 years. So I asked, how come we signed up with IMF that we're going to rationalize this cocoa roads thing and drop it from 21 billion to 6.6 billion? Then I'm told that we needed to go out on the field. What we did was desktop analysis. We needed to now take the consultants to the field to go and actualize what had been done, desktop. And now we owe the consultants. And so for 2 years, we did not embark on this exercise that was going to take 15 billion cedis off our books. So I asked, who are the consultants and how much do we owe them? So highways and feeder roads. I said, okay, how much do we owe them? So we owe highways about 120, we owe feeder roads about 80 million cedis. So I said, how much did we need to give to them in order to go and do this exercise? So if we gave highways 30 million and give feeder roads 20 million, they would go with us to go and do this job. So I said,
million.
Yes. So I said, so you needed to spend 50 million cedis to engage in an exercise that was going to take 15 billion cedis off your books. And for 2 years, you've not done that. Meanwhile, for these 2 years, you have signed contracts for Jude Sachs, almost $100 million that you have not cleared. $100 million that you have not cleared, over 1 billion. And you needed to pay 50 million cedis to consultants to go and actualize a rationalization exercise that will take 15 billion cedis off your debt, your books, your commitments. So I then called the Honorable Abuja, and then I also spoke with the finance minister. So we had a joint meeting, set up a joint team. The team completed this work last week, the rationalization, and they've now submitted a report. So we'll now sit together and see how we can action it. So these are some of the ways that the place was run. And you go around and everybody, contractors, because as I speak with you, the certificates at the cash office, that's work certified to have been completed at the cash office for cocoa roads alone is 4.4 billion cedis.
How are you going to pay?
We don't have the money. So I explained to them. In fact, even tomorrow I have a meeting with one of the associations. I've met the shipping lines. One of the first meetings I did, because they had blacklisted Cocoa Board, blacklisted many of our suppliers, because some of them had brought their containers with the goods, and for 2 years they have not returned with the containers to continue their business. So some of our suppliers had even petitioned me and attached documents that they have been blacklisted by these shipping lines because they imported things. You know, Cocoa Board imports CIF. So once the importer brings the thing to the port and gives the bill of lading to Cocoa Board, their work is done. So all these things are the ports that they said they have not cleared. Whether we find them or not, we'll pay.
Wow.
Yes, whether we find them or not, we have to pay.
Well, we're going to take a short break again. And then when we come back, Randy has been talking about cocoa roads and so on. I'd like to find out that there's a strong view that Cocoa Board should perhaps focus on its core responsibilities. I'd like to find out what you think about that. Right. And what will these core responsibilities be? Right. Short break.
Mido, you're not Biana. I'm for you have a bit soon every time I just say baby shit. Mangashi.
Junior!
I'm saying so enough for maybe the no.
Sister Cospa, it's a winning gas.
I'm using the why. Why? down Yankanawa.
Ah, sister, course. Use gas. Gas ye fast, ye easy, ye convenient. And wow.
LBG, let me see your hand. Ooh, I got
Welcome back to Talk Time, and we are in conversation with Dr. Randy Abbey, the boss of Cocoa Board in distress. This argument that you should focus on your core duties, your core responsibility, how do you say it?
Well, we see it should not be an argument. It is a fact. It should not be an argument. What was Cocoa Board set up to do? That's your core mandate. Everything else is supplementary to the core. So you can't have a situation, that is why I said that if the Ministry of Roads that has all these agencies under it, is doing road projects, is giving a contract of 76 billion, they are even complaining. How does Cocoa Board do a third of that?
Yeah.
How do you sign contracts 21 billion to construct roads for what? When you have not paid, you can't pay LBCs. You are not able to pay those who are supplying you inputs. You just keep piling debts. And then you're just signing road contracts. That's not what you... When you have done the job, and first of all, the concept of Cocoa Roads, as far as I'm concerned, is very important. As I speak to you today, there is a place that has been cut off in the Sankregua area. The MCA reached out to me yesterday. You know, and she sent me the videos, you know, but what we need to do is to collaborate with the Ministry of Roads, with government. And then if at the end of the year, we've made some money, we can decide that, look, we will dedicate some money, identify some particular roads that we can use this money for. And then let them look at constructing these roads. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Yes. We cannot, that cannot become our primary responsibility. We are not a roads board. We are a cocoa board. So we must concern ourselves primarily with cocoa. Yes, you need a good roads in order to get the cocoa out of the farms. But that's not your core mandate. The construction of the roads is not your core mandate. The beans that you sell, you are not selling the beans in order to make money to go and construct roads. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Fully.
Yes, so that is why I say that there is no argument. It cannot be an argument. The thing is that you must focus on what your core mandate is. And then everything else becomes. So there ought to be that collaboration. I think that one of the problems we also have in Ghana is that we have institutions also working across purposes. But it's important because this rationalization, for example, it happened because the minister invited me. Minister of Roads invited me. We had a discussion. We met, my team and their team, constituted a joint team. They went out there on the field. They've done the work. They've brought it. We will look at how we are going to implement this. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Definitely.
Yeah, so we need to see, because the cocoa brings the state revenue. So if we identify those areas where we cut the cocoa from, government must be interested in ensuring that those roads are done so that the cocoa can be cutted from those areas for the revenues to come in. Because without those things, the revenue will not come in. So we can come to a situation where every year, on the basis of how we perform financially, Cocoa Board should be able to dedicate or allocate a certain amount of money, which will then be used to do those things. But you cannot have a situation where you are just awarding contracts, and you are not awarding the contracts on the basis of things that you've planned and budgeted for, or whether those things can be contained within your financial strength or capabilities. But you just keep awarding just because it's an election year, or because some people have asked. When I went round, when I met the chiefs and some people, the issue of cocoa roads came up. They are who buy so we are quite send I say I say yes mean we me for kwa me sisi nyina me ya me chi me ya. However, no cranny say I can go to Accra tomorrow, call a contractor, go through the process, award the contract.
How do you pay?
I can't pay the person. The person will bring the equipment after some days, they will abandon the site. Or if the contractor is resourceful, he will go ahead and finish the contract, and we won't have money to pay. And all I'll be doing is to compound the problem. So I'm here to tell you the truth. This is what has happened. There's 4.4 billion at the cash office. How we are going to pay that, we don't know. The total commitment contracts that have been signed is 21 billion. So please, exercise patience. Let's resolve these things, and in the meantime, see how government itself, through the Ministry of Roads, can deal with some of these issues. Now, we need to breathe some life into cocoa board. We need to let the farmers have some value. We need to begin to drop the debt, try and retire the debt. Look, KWESI, cocoa prices are at an all-time high today.
Yeah.
But the Ghanaian farmer and cocoa board have not benefited. The Ghanaian farmer and cocoa board have not benefited from these high prices. Do you know why?
Tell me.
In 2023-24, cocoa board signed contracts for $2,600, the previous management, $2,600 a ton. And for the first time in the history of cocoa board in Ghana, cocoa board could not deliver 333,767 tons. 333,767 tons of cocoa that is sold at 2,600. So, these 333,767 tons had to be rolled over to the 24-25 season. Now, the 24-25 season is what has witnessed the increase. So, the Ghanaian cocoa farmer
still selling.
Yes, is producing the cocoa, and we are using that cocoa, the today cocoa, and the mandate that the previous management gave, because they started the 24-25 season, the mandate they gave to CMC was 6,600. So we are basically using 6,600 cocoa to service a $2,600 contract that was not fulfilled. So for every ton of cocoa this year that we used to service this 333,000 tons, the Ghanaian farmer and cocoa board loses $4,000 on a single ton, every ton. Every ton. As at last month, we see we had serviced 210,000 tons of that. That's a loss of $840 million. So this is money that should have gone to the cocoa farmer largely, and then some to cocoa board. 840 million. We've not been able to service all. We expect to send roll over about 120,000 of that into the next season, 25-26. And continue using 25-26 cocoa to service this thing. 333,767 tons. By the time we finish servicing this cocoa, the cocoa farmer and cocoa board would have lost in excess of $1.5 billion.
Just lost.
Lost on the basis of a decision that was taken. Would have lost $1.5 billion. Now, but for that decision, this is money that would have gone to a cocoa farm, would have paid more. That is why, we see, you remember when the season opened and they gave the price, there was a lot of agitation. You should be giving the farmer 6,000.
Yeah.
You should be giving the farmer more.
Yeah.
What you have given is not enough. You know, it started around 2,900 when they opened in September. Then 3 weeks to the election, they moved it to 3,100. And there were a lot of, you should give the farmer 6,000. You should give the farmer more. You should give the farmer this. But they couldn't go more because they knew what they had done. They knew about the rollover. The rest of us in this country didn't know. So the rollover was the reason why they could only go to 3-1. Even the 3-1, there was resistance in Cocoa House because of the implications. Because 333,000 tons, if I even put the 767 tons aside, had to be serviced, sold at 2,600. So all these monies is money that could have gone to the farmer as a result of us increasing the price for them because of the. So everybody is talking about high prices of cocoa, but the cocoa farmer and cocoa board are not benefiting. And the cocoa farmer and the cocoa board are not benefiting because the previous management could not deliver 333,767 tons of cocoa. They sold at 2,600.
You know what simply amazes me? It's not the fact that you accepted this responsibility, but just that having come face to face with all of these problems, we are still there. No, I mean, Randy, I'm serious. I'm not joking.
KWESI?
Because I'm sitting here, I'm just baffled, you know.
So,
how are you going to solve all these problems?
So KWESI, Cocoa Board is a microcosm of Ghana.
I don't think so.
No, it is a microcosm of the situation in Ghana today.
No, the situation in Cocoa Board is something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's only ECG that makes Cocoa Board look good. Only ECG.
Even ECG.
No, only ECG makes her look good. Their debt is 60 something. We are 30 something.
No, it's not about the contour. So you see, you have this level of indebtedness.
Yes.
And you have a crumbling industry.
Yes.
You understand? Production has fallen. Swollen shoot disease is taking its toll. We are riddled with huge levels of indebtedness. It's different.
So KWESI, the point I was just making.
With Electricity Company of Ghana, you can solve the problem by increasing tariffs. You can't do that in Cocoa Board.
So KWESI, you know, it's difficult. The hole is deep, but it's doable.
You keep saying that.
Yes, I spent all my time with the team, crunching the numbers, looking at the strategy, doing everything. I've sat with my sector minister. I've sat with many other people. I've shown them the plan. It's doable. We must stay disciplined. We must stay focused. I must be committed to be disciplined and not repeat the things that have been done. And within 4 years, I believe that we can bring Cocoa Board back because there's a plan. We've worked on it. I've seen it. I'm convinced that is doable. There's going to be some very difficult decisions. There'll be hard times like this year because all this revenue that should have come to us is not coming to us as a result of these decisions that we're taking for the 23-24 season. But it's doable. And then we're also expecting the prices to be high, let's say for another 2 years. Within those 2 years, we also expect to ramp up production a bit. So this year, fortunately, we might finish around 590,600 tons, 600,000 tons, 590, 600,000. We're hoping that we'll be able to push it forward to about 650 and probably get into 700. So that if after 2 years the prices drop, because the analysis suggests that this pricing thing is an outlier where the prices are now, it could drop to maybe about 6,550. If by the time it gets to that area, we have also been able to ramp up production to about 700 or 750,000, we still remain in the $4 billion bracket. And once we are able to do that, we should be able to retire debts decently. And once we're also disciplined and we don't do many of the things that, or all the things that have brought us to where we are, we should be able to have a healthy Cocoa Board once again. And so it is that plan with the prayer that the assumptions will hold. That is what motivates me to continue doing it. And I believe that with a team I have at Cocoa Board, we'll be able to deliver.
Well, short break. And when we come back, I'd like to find out if there are any programs, ideas for value addition in the cocoa sector. Short break.
Middle, Ghana Biana. I'm for Jibby, you have a bit soon. If it's not I just say, baby, shit. Mangashi.
Junior!
I'm saying so enough for maybe the no.
Sister Cospa, it's a winning gas.
I'm using the why. Why?
Down Yankanawa.
Sister Cos. Use gas. Gas ye fast, ye easy, ye convenient.
Wow. Let me see your hand.
Welcome back to Talk Time, and we are in conversation with Dr. Randy Abbey, Chief Executive Officer of Cocoa Board. First of all, the Research Institute, Cocoa Research Institute, is under your...
Yes.
You know they're doing pretty good work.
Yes.
How do you intend to encourage them?
So, I have been there.
For example, I'll give you one problem. They're producing cocoa whiskey.
Yes.
And I'm told that it's one of the best tasting whiskeys you can find.
Yes.
But it's in plastic bottles.
Yes.
Small investment.
Yes.
And it becomes a gold mine.
Yes.
And so many other things, cocoa soap and so on.
Yes.
How do you intend to encourage them?
So there are two ways of looking at that, KWESI. First of all, I think that they are scientists, very brilliant. We have about 45 scientists at Craig. They're doing a great job and all that. Now, Craig was set up to do research so Craig is doing cocoa, is doing coffee, is doing cashew, is doing shea and cola, 5. So although Cocoa Board is not involved with cola, with cashew, and even with shea now because of tree crop development, we're still maintaining that mandate of Craig because we also should be able to contribute scientific research as far as Ghana is concerned. So although Cocoa Board is not superintending over these crops, we still think that we should leave Craig to also continue to do this to support tree crop development and all other farmers in this area. So we're doing that as our contribution. Now, these scientists are doing very well. Now, there is nothing wrong with the private sector taking advantage of this to take some of this research work and then go and commercialize it, provided that we're also getting value for that scientific work done. So that's one way of looking at it. So they can continue to remain a research institute. However, they must get commensurate value for the research work, which is then commercialized by private entities. So that's one way of looking at it and making sure that there is value for what is done, because it also costs us money to do this research and to support these researchers. The other thing too is to also find a way of creating a commercial unit. So let the scientists focus on it. Don't force a scientist to become a business development person. Let them focus on their research and then create a business development unit or organ, which will then be tasked with the responsibility of turning this work into commercial things. So these are the two options on my table that we're looking at. But I don't believe in forcing the scientists to turn themselves into. We need to let people focus on what they are good at and encourage them to do more.
Soap and to package it.
Yes. So the issue of packaging, a product development and all that, that is also a skill. And so you must find people who have that skill to do it. That is if you want to also be actively involved in the product development. Otherwise, product development for commercial purposes. Otherwise, let the private sector take advantage of the research work, but let them also give commensurate value for that research work.
What are the cocoa products company?
CPC. Okay. So CPC, Cocoa Board owns about 80% of CPC. And CPC is run down. I went there as well. In this short while, it will surprise you where I've been to. You know, I went to CPC as well. And CPC has 2 plants. So you have the first plant, the Kwame Nkrumah one. That is shut down.
Completely?
Shut down completely. So I even went in there.
That used to make golden tree. And
yes. They still do golden tree.
But at different plants.
So on the second plant, I think that was during President Kufuor's era. So that is what is in use. So that has a capacity of about 30,000. But CPC has been run down. Last year, Cocoa Board had to convert $85 million of debt into equity because the place is not being run well. So we're embarking on a restructuring of CPC. So my deputy FNA, Atubuatin, is in charge of that to look at how to restructure that. Cocoa Board owns 40% in WAMCO. Atu is also in charge of that restructuring because there is some money, not that there is money in the value addition, because whether you are turning the thing into powder or into liquor or into butter, I mean, the returns are massive. So that's how come the countries that do not produce any cocoa are those who make the money. You know, we are doing about 20% of the world's cocoa, but we do less than 2% of the money in the value chain. And so we've decided to take a good look at these two institutions and try and deal with them. But there's a bigger problem. The bigger problem, KWESI, is that Ghana currently has a processing capacity of 500,000 tons. Okay. Now, the highest we have had in light crop is about 300,000 tons. This year, we have not even made 50,000 tons of light crop because of improvements in agronomic practices. So you have a dwindling yield of light crop and an increasing yield of main crop. Now, the light crop is discounted. So for the processors in Ghana, they can only be competitive when they purchase the light crop. But look at the capacity, 500,000 capacity for processing. A light crop yield about 50,000. So you are doing 10% or less than 10% of the capacity. So how will the processors survive? Now, if you look at even, because if they decide to do main crop, they will not be competitive because of the price. Now, if you look at even importing from neighboring countries, just a month ago, Cote d'Ivoire's version of the cocoa board, they invited me, I couldn't attend. They've actually inaugurated 2 processing factories, one in Abidjan, one in San Pedro, with a capacity to produce 200,000 tons each. So those 2 factories alone, after their final phase, will be doing 400,000 tons. So Cote d'Ivoire itself will not have extra light crop to even export to anybody or sell to anybody. So that is one of the things that we must look at as a country. How will the processors be able to process main crop and still be competitive? Are we going to look at the tax regimes again? And if you look at those who are outside the free zones, so those who we want to call the artisanal producers, those who are not at the level of qualification for free zones, they virtually have to pay taxes on everything, the dairy and others that they use in processing. Those in the free zones get a lot of, tax reliefs because they're in the free zones. So for some of these people, their tax and levy components, the duties and taxes constitute maybe about 60 or 70%. So it makes it extremely difficult for them. So without a light crop, processing becomes a huge challenge. So even if CPC, both lines were running, and CPC's capacity is 60,000, our total light crop will not even be able to feed it. Not to talk about WAMCO. If WAMCO is even able to do 15 or 20,000 tons, we will not even have the capacity. That is if we say we are not even selling beans to any other processor but our own. We won't even have enough beans for them to be able to meet their capacity. So it's a conversation that we really need to have, because also for the farmer it is better that they are getting more main crop than light crop, because the main crop fetches more money than light crop. So you cannot even say that you are going to engage in a strategy to produce more light crop. No.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the problem now has to do with the price, which makes main crop being used as the bean for processing not
In
competitive.
Yes.
Yes.
Randy, thank you very much.
Thank you, KWESI.
I'm most grateful.
Thank you.
Really grateful for coming.
Thank you.
Well, viewers, we'll be in a conversation with Dr. Randy Abbey, the CEO of Cocoa Board. And I hope that now we understand the situation in Cocoa Board much better than before. I'm going to ask him to come back sometime when there are issues to be discussed so we can follow the developments in the cocoa industry. But until then, please keep your dial still on Pan-African television, because we bring you the best in everything, best in sports, best in news, best in current affairs, just the best in everything. Keep your dial here. It's bye-bye from the producer-director, George Binaire, from Adam, the director, and from all of us at Pan-African Television. See you again very soon. Bye-bye.
African.
Chris, last time we talked, it was immediately after the election. 2 years into Trump's presidency, give us an assessment of how Trump has further deteriorated the last vestiges of our democratic institutions.
Right. I would argue that it's not Trump who has accelerated the deterioration of our democratic institutions, but by all of those forces within the political establishment, and I would argue the press, that are tasked with defending an open society. They've failed us. I mean, Trump, if the rule of law was in place, could have been impeached on the first day he took the presidency under the emoluments clause. He's utterly shameless about Mar-a-Lago or the Trump Hotel in Washington, which is raking in millions of dollars from lobbyists and foreign governments.